Hey, and welcome to Digital Noir Presents live from Pause Fest. We're not actually live today. This is recorded a couple of weeks after the event's finished. Today we're catching up with Rachael O'Meara, who's a sales executive at Google and author of the very fitting book titled Pause. I didn't actually get a chance to catch up with her at Pause, so we've taken the time to jump on Skype and record this. Throughout the conference, the Digital Noir team was set up on the atrium, overlooking the foyer there at Fed Square and all the happenings that was going on below, having some incredible chats with some really inspiring people. We've been going to Pause for the last 4, maybe 5 years now, and it's been so great to see it grow and the great work that George and his team does, bringing together such an eclectic bunch of creatives and thinkers and thought leaders to take some time to actually pause, build connections and learn and get inspired. So I think it's quite fitting kicking off with Rachael. So let's dive right in. Well, let's jump in with pausing. I mean, it's such a fitting title for the conference. Did George find you, or did you find George to sort of come over for it?
So what happened was I got wind of the Pause Fest event through a mutual friend who had been at Pause Fest the year before, Julie Terrell, who was in my network here. So that worked out great, and I applied and got in. Yeah, worked out. It was like meant to be, I think.
That's amazing. I had a chat with her actually at another conference, South Start here in Adelaide, earlier in the year. She's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. She's going to be in my neck of the woods. She's coming here, I think, tomorrow or something. She'll just be in town for a bunch of CEO stuff. So I'll see her, hopefully.
Your first time down to Australia?
It was my second time, but it'd been a while. Last time I was there was 2005. Okay. So, man, it's been a big gap.
To Melbourne, or had you been elsewhere on that trip?
I had been to Melbourne, and but only 3 days. It was my first stop, and it was actually a pause I took when I was working at DoubleClick, which was at the time had a policy that if you worked for 7 years, you could get a 4-week paid vacation.
Nice.
And I went to New Zealand and Australia, so like it was awesome.
Proper holiday.
Totally, and it was like, oh, I need this so much. Like that was my second long pause. I've had like 3 long ones like that. And I was like, there's something going on here.
And what was your experience like coming back down again? Obviously primarily for the event, but I know that you stayed on for the retreat afterwards as well.
Yeah, I went to the retreat. So I kind of made it an experience in itself. I came a few days early. I had the whole weekend there. It was so nice. It was like 100 degrees in my Fahrenheit temperatures. I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it was hot. And I don't remember it being that hot before. And then I had the conference, and then I stayed, and we went to, I'm forgetting where it was in the south there, the awesome cottages, and was there for the weekend. And then I flew out the Sunday night because I had to get back. Yeah, it was wonderful.
What did you think of the event? What were some of the takeaways for you?
I got a lot out of the event, and what I liked about it was I think what any marks of a strong event are the people that go. So just meeting people, I feel like that's at least any good event is like 50%. And I hate the word networking, right? Like, or it's not networking. It's like I'm meeting cool people.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the case for Pause Fest. And then the retreat, I met amazing people there, still in touch with them, trying to help a few people out. Like we're continually networking. You and I met like for 2 minutes, and here I am on the podcast. So I feel like it was a wonderful experience, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was so good. And the conference itself was great. The content was great. I love the whole startup thing. And I met the winner of that which was Michael Leben, an Emmy. So just like really cool.
Yeah, I think that the thing, and I said this a lot through the chats that we had. So we had a bunch of amazing chats over the 3 days. But I think the way Georgia set up Pause, there's a lot of connection points, right? So it isn't just people up on stage and you, the audience, sort of sitting there listening. There's a chance to get out and meet people and for the speakers to do the same.
For sure. Yeah. And it helped me learn more about what is going on. I learned so much about the startup community in Australia. Being from the US, I don't have that insight and those lenses. So I learned a ton actually. And that's what was really cool is I learned a great depth of what's going on and what seems to be emerging out of a lot of companies. So it was really cool. I just liked it. I want to go again.
What is the kind of, I suppose, from SF or from the States looking to Australia? I mean, you probably don't think about Australia that much, but what is the kind of perception of Australia and what's happening down here? I suppose with the lens of the tech world or, that space.
Yeah. Well, I think that I'm in Silicon Valley. Okay. So it's like, I'm in like this crazy bubble anyway. So I think even my perception would be different from someone who's in New York, who's in Washington and Washington State and Seattle. Like, I feel like the pockets of the US in itself are different enough, probably similar to Australia.
Yeah.
And I think the perception is there is stuff going on. Like, there's great companies coming out of there. I think Canva was the most recent one that I learned about. I had no idea that they were Australian. I use them almost every day. Love them. Yay. So I think the awareness is increasing, and potentially, like, who knows? I know George and I were talking, maybe it comes to the US. Maybe POSFest makes its way to New York one day. No, you didn't hear it from me, but maybe.
No, that would be amazing. I think the concept's good.
So
And it does have sort of its own unique identity, I think. Sort of eclectic mix of creative, business, and thinkers. So often, you get quite niche conferences, right? Like you might go to sort of an ad focused conference or a CRM conference. I mean, this is very broad.
Yeah. So what I thought was there's a few conferences that I've been in, like a flavor of POSFest, but different. There's World Domination Summit, which is Chris Guillebeau's conference. Okay. I don't know if you've heard of it, out in Portland, Oregon. And it was similar in that I think it's really about the community and what you can create together and how you can support each other. So I felt like that total vibe happening in POSFest, which I thought was just a total way of like a win and like a sign of a good conference. I go to conferences all the time that are like industry conferences and they're good, but I don't walk away with that same feeling of, wow, this wowed me and I want more. And like, usually it's like, okay, cool. I learned a few things. And this was more about, I think, learning plus the connection. And that's what I think makes it better.
So you work at Google, you were down here talking not about that though specifically, but about some of the other things that you're interested in. So you've written a book called Pause. So I wrote a book called Pause, Harnessing the Life-Changing Power of Giving Yourself a Break. And it's a book that is actually a story that starts out in my burnout of Google. So it's almost this like, hey guys, welcome to my life. And I burned out. And then the rest of the book is really filled with what I wanted to share, which were tips and tools that I've learned since my burnout, which I think if I had known any of those, I don't think I would have been in the predicament of feeling so exhausted and like a failure. I really felt like I couldn't get anything right. And my mental state was just one of continual tailspins of thinking I sucked. And the book is filled with research, neuroscience, and basically like leadership and educational theory research on why intentional shifts in behavior are helpful. And then it talks about like the signs you know you need a pause, because I call a pause any intentional shift in behavior. So it's not like it has to be a long-term break or anything. Okay.
So it's a pretty comprehensive book, and it's, I think, a really practical look at how you could shift so that your life is feeling much more satisfying and fulfilling.
When you went through that burnout and then sort of trying to come out the other end, how did you sort of find these techniques and tips to start, I suppose, building and healing?
I made them up. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't make them up. What ended up happening was I did go back to Google. So I looked in those, I took 3 months unpaid leave, which was a gift. I totally realized that. And not a lot of people have that opportunity, but I knew if I looked for a role right away, I think I would have found myself in a really similar predicament. So I kind of had that instinct of knowing I need to chill out a little bit. And so I did come back to Google, and I started hosting authors at Google. So if you've ever seen the Talks at Google channel, which has 900,000 followers and all kinds of people speak on it. And one of them was a woman who I'd been introduced to, who had a school for emotional intelligence with her husband in Chicago in the US. And she invited me to a weekend training, and turns out I went to the weekend, I signed up for the class, I signed up for more classes, and I learned these tools. So they're based in emotional intelligence, which are really the self-awareness tools of being more in tune with how you feel and how you can read a room and being a better leader so you can influence more. And it all really is honed in on knowing how you're feeling. And so that's, I think, the crux of the book. And by feeling, I just mean, what is going on with you? Do you feel exhausted? And if so, well, let's take a look at that. And why might that be? Or maybe I don't know how I feel, or maybe there's a fear, like a huge anxiety that I've continually like looking at with my life that I haven't really honestly decided what to do about, and things like that. So I learned these at a school. It's called the Right Foundation.
Cool. And I've been in the industry that you're in, and that a lot of our listeners are in, I suppose, either working in, the tech space, or, running their own businesses. You often find that you're running, right? You're sort of running 12, 15 hours a day, and you don't often take time away from that.
Yeah.
Like, it's always at the front of your mind.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the big themes of pause in the book is that we have a choice. And as people every day, there's choices moment by moment we make. And this is an existentialist principle here, which is a foundation of my teachings, in that I don't have to go 12 to 15 hours. I could create some boundaries or work in a way that serves me. Maybe I divide up my days differently and all of those things. But how do I know unless I actually am conscious of what I can change and then choose differently? And that's where the rubber meets the road, I guess.
Do you think there's been a shift in the last sort of 5 years or so of people sort of starting to take this on?
Yeah, I do. And I actually started writing the book when I returned from my break, which was 2012,
Okay.
Right in the beginning of 2012. And it took me 5 years to write the book.
Wow.
I was working full time. Like, that was the thing. I knew I couldn't go full tilt. So I just wrote it on my schedule. I did a couple hours on the weekend. It did take discipline, but I remember thinking, and this might have been now 3 or 4 years ago, like, who's going to read this? Like, it's about mindfulness, and like, that's such a creepy, weird topic right now. And like, nobody does that. And here we are, it's 2019, and it's like the hottest topic there is right now. And people want to learn more, or they think that that's the solution to things, and it may or may not be. So I think there's been a big shift. And I think what's really interesting is it's up to each of us to make the shift. It's not like we're getting told to do that. And society tells us, hey, work the 12 to 15 hours, get it done, do it, right? Like, we know that. That's what's familiar, and it's always on. And the reality is that is not sustainable. And I heard a woman, I can't remember, it was the woman who did a talk at Pause Fest on Generation Z, and she talked about thrive staining. So it's like, how do you thrive sustainably? So she came up with this word, thrive staining. I made a mental note of that, because
Thrive staining.
It's not enough to sustain anymore. It's just not. And like, how do you really thrive? And the key to me is intentional shifts in behavior. You have to create the space. You have to decide what works for you. You have to create the boundaries. And a lot of people, I know I did this too when I was freaking out in my job and burning out. It's like, I can't do that. I got to be on. My boss is expecting these emails at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. And all of that was true. But the reality was it really worth it? And did it really matter? And the answer was probably not. I probably could have. And she told me it didn't matter. She's like, you don't need to respond to these right away. I just like to do my emails on Sundays and things like that. And so I think it's just a matter of knowing what works for you and then shifting it.
And
that's
I think
not easy.
The proof's in the pudding a bit as well. I think I've been guilty, and probably slammed to a certain extent in the past, of maybe talking about some of these topics that you're talking about needing to take a break, and about, not wanting my team to be, working long hours for the sake of it. But then I suppose as a business owner, I fall into the trap of, waking up early and answering emails early and all through the night. And over the last, I suppose, 18 months, I sort of really had to, and I think you're right. It is that intentional shift in behavior. It's not like, well, you need to sit down and say, right, I'm not going to sleep with my phone next to my bed, right? That seems like a simple thing to do, but that's something I did for 4 years, and I would wake up 3 or 4 times in the night and check emails.
Right. And so you create rules. And so one of the things I like to tell people is you can create daily pauses or digital device pauses. So there's many types of pauses you can have. And what I like is digital device pausing, I feel like, is the number one way we could start, because we all have a phone typically, and we could do one thing that change our habits. Yet it is difficult. We get wired and tethered, and I know I'm as guilty as the next person. My brain works the same way as yours, right? And I want to reward myself by the little chimes I hear. But if I can plug my phone in the hallway here and not sleep with it in my room, how much, like, the chances of me getting up are much lower. And now some of the newer models have awesome ways that you can set your preferences so that it just turns everything off. You could be watching at 11 p.m. and all of a sudden your videos goes dark because you've set it up that way. And it's up to you to really choose to really honor that. But it's possible.
And it is possible. And I think that, that this massive shift that sort of happened with technology in the last, 15 years that we've just had sort of, some of us have been brought up with that. Some of us have sort of we've all accepted it really, but I don't think we really fully grasped what we were bringing into our lives. And now we're sort of waking up a bit and going, okay, well, we actually have to manage this.
Yeah, exactly. And the question that's coming to my mind right now is, what's the price you're willing to pay? Like that's super theoretical, but also I think it's a good question for each of us to know, like, what is the price that you're willing to pay? Is it worth disrupting my dinner if a phone call comes? Is it worth getting up at 3 a.m. and then not going to check my email? Like then everyone's going to have a different answer. But when you think of it like that and then experiment and decide what works for you, you may be surprised. You may end up thinking that something wasn't possible or thinking it wouldn't work. And all of a sudden, Sundays out as a nature pause, walking around the block, you feel good and you didn't need the phone after all and stuff like that.
What's your take on like the 4-day work week and I suppose reducing hours that we're at work, but potentially increasing productivity at the same time?
Yeah, I'm all for it. And I think we're not there yet as a culture. No. And I'm curious to hear what it's like in Australia, especially like remote workers. And that's the case for what I'm aware of is, like tomorrow is Friday for me and I'm not going into the office. I'll work from home, but that's my choice.
Sure.
I'm still working though, but I think it's great, but it's about the boundaries that you create. So if you're willing to work 10 hours a day, Monday through Thursday, awesome. But you got to get the buy-in from your network and your boss, and maybe that's the way you work and they all work anyway. But I think as long as you get the work done, then you're good to go. But it just depends on the role, right? If you're in a 24/7 customer support line, you can't not work on a Friday, or someone's got to work that shift or something. So there's things to be made out. But I'm a big proponent of working efficiently, and it's not about showing up and clocking in because your boss is there, and like that doesn't serve anybody. And your boss probably is watching, but probably doesn't care as much as you think they care. And if you had that conversation, it would work and you could change it up if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we're trying to educate our team, and I think probably just the general community at large. Like I know that I work better in the morning. Like I wake up early every day, and from like let's say 5:30 until 10, like that's my brain's on. I feel good. I smash stuff out, and I'm quite focused. And really from then, Slack starts up and email starts up, and I just have so many inputs that my concentration just kind of goes to shit really. And then so the afternoon, I don't think I should be doing deep work. So I'm trying to rearrange my schedule so that it fits into that. And obviously it doesn't always fly, with client meetings and, other demands on your time. And that's another thing where it's that real intentional shift. You sort of have to say, no, well, this is how I work, and sort of just force it almost. And it does take time to do it, but I think you can see the benefits if you actually figure out, and it is that sort of self-knowledge. When do I work best? It might be the opposite. I think some of my team probably work better at night. So if you want to do that, and the output's going to be there, great. Like that doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's about choosing what as your natural performance cycles, and we're different. All of us are kind of wired differently, and there's different hours of the day that you might feel more productive, and I think that's really valid. It's a great point, and you can't disregard that when you're thinking about it.
It was interesting that talk. I think it was it Stephanie from Vice that was it the report on Gen Z? Was that the talk?
That was it. Stephanie,
yeah, cool. Yeah, great. That's really interesting. So, I mean, we've been through quite a lot of just in marketing. So, how to market to millennials, but then Gen Z is this kind of new, a little bit of an unknown, and it's interesting because they're true digital natives, right? It'd be interesting to see what their take is on how they can, find those pause spaces, and if they're going to be as wide potentially as millennials are, because I think millennials actually find it quite difficult, myself included, to pull themselves away from it. But maybe Gen Z might have a different take on it. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and what I learned from that talk, and I'm really excited for Gen Z. I love what you said, Gen Z. I'll call them Z, and I am, because what I took away from learnings from that talk was they are digital natives, and then they also lived through the financial crisis of 2008. So they know, like as a whole, right? Generally speaking, there's a lot of time and value associated with time and money. Like where am I putting my energy towards, and is it worth it? Like I think that is so cool. It's not a concept most people know innately unless
No.
there has been a crisis or something tragic. So I kudos to Gen Z. I'm excited that you're coming on board and working in the workforce because not only are you digitally savvy and you get it, there's so much you have to offer, and I see that. Like I actually my assistant is Gen Z as well, and I just am like thriving as well, learning more from him, and he's learning from me, and it's this mutual way to help each other. I like that.
It's interesting if you like think about time as a commodity and you really value time, because I think we were sort of brought up in this world of a 40-hour work week, and whatever happens, that's what's there, right? And that's the time you have to work. So go to work 8 hours, and I think a lot of
totally
that's just the mind state. But if you're thinking right, I can get this much done in 3 hours, and it's going to be peak performance, and then I'm going to spend 3 hours doing if you start thinking about it like that. And I think that's where the 4-day work week and other sort of flexible working arrangements become really beneficial if you think about time as sort of that really valuable commodity.
Oh yeah. And there's a technique that I've adopted to basically it's called time chunking.
Yep.
So you can create 15-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute blocks, and ideally it's like you compress the time. You literally like put a timer on your phone. You have a charm. You have the bell goes off at 15, but you say what you're going to get done in that 15 minutes, and then you're just cranking. But it's like self-induced stress, but it's at the level that's optimal. It's not overstressed, and it's not I'll just get it done because I got the day to do it.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable what you get done in those time chunks. And I'm reluctant to do it because I know I'm going to have to show up and produce. It's like that's the fear I have. But then when I do it, I did it on the weekend because I do a lot of stuff. Like I do my full job, and how I don't burn out is that I structure my time so I know I can take those breaks, and I know I can feel satisfied and follow my deeper desires and things like that. But yeah, just having 15 minutes and going through 2 or 3 of those, I can do a lot, whereas it might take me traditionally 2 to 3 hours.
So we work with the Pomodoro technique, which is essentially that sort of similar kind of concept. So 20-minute chunks where you say, right, I'm going to focus on one task for 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and then get back into it. And to be honest, I don't do it as much as I should. When I do it, I'm always so amazed at how much work I get done, because you're right. Like I'll start working on one thing, and it's maybe a 20-minute job, but you add a couple of Slack messages in there, a phone call, an email, a chat about something. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Now it's 2 hours later, and you're sort of just finishing it up.
Yeah, and that's where the intention comes in, right? It all goes back to intention. Like that, to me, could be a pause. If you have a really productive 15 minutes, it's an intentional shift in behavior. You're not always like that. You're not typically like crushing it in 15-minute chunks.
Yeah.
But you set that up for yourself, and who knows what could happen. I think that's pretty exciting.
What other kind of actionable tips from the book or elsewhere do you think you could share with the listeners?
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of practical tips in the book itself, but the ones that I think I'll just name. So I mentioned daily pauses already, and there's many things that you can do for yourself that work here. So the idea is to break your day up, and maybe every 90 minutes or so at the most, you would get up and move around, and again, it's an intentional shift in behavior. So a belly breath pause. Literally one breath. And if you want to do this with me, we can take a hand and put it on your abdomen.
Yep.
And just take one breath, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your nose. Take your hand away. And listeners, I hope you did that too. And so to me, that's a conscious breath. That's a pause. You could build up to 10 breaths for that. Don't have to leave your desk. You can walk to the elevator. If you're in the elevator, is a really good one. There's also one that I really like, and I know it's audio, so you won't see this, but if you hold up a hand, like your palm of your hand, about like 6 inches from your face, like 20 centimeters or something, and just notice it. So take in, I'm doing this right now, and if you want to do it with me, just take in the color you see and just notice the texture, the feel, the air that you feel around it. And you could even just take a inhale and blow gently on the palm of your hand so you feel like a warm breeze on your palm. and go ahead and take your hand, put it down. Does that feel different?
It does. Yeah, it really does.
Isn't that crazy? That's a micro pause from my colleague, Dr. David King Keller. He wrote a PhD on pausing. It's just totally a prop in my book. But what's going on there is you're basically distracting yourself from your overwhelm thinking, like brain, and you're going into your sensory perception, your prefrontal cortex, and your breath is signaling responses, like wondering what that is, and there's a curiosity. And so you're just evoking this whole other thought pattern, which is taking you out of what you were in. And to me, that is crazy good and super secretly awesome as like a, in the back of your pocket, quick pause you could always do. And you could do one hand, you could do two hands, but that takes maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's right. It's so simple. And I think with mindfulness, there's this, often people are sort of fearful to get into it because they think it's this big practice they're gonna have to take on and spend huge amounts of their time learning how to meditate or whatever it might be. But yeah, something as simple as literally looking at your hand for a minute and just taking that time to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. And mindfulness can mean many things. Meditation is attention training. So that's when you sit and have like a really disciplined practice, but you can do different types of meditation, walking meditation, which is really just noticing all those senses, how your feet feel on the ground. How does the air feel on your face or your hands? And another one that I really like is just self-awareness pausing. So if you're doing something else, because let's face it, we don't have extra time sometimes to do sitting for 10 minutes or let alone one. And so if you're doing something already, maybe you're cooking or brushing your teeth, like just mindfully like noticing the smells and how the bristles feel on your teeth or all of those things. They're wonderful times to pause, and they bring the same sensations that we just went through with the hand or the belly breath. And they're so powerful. They're free. You can do them at any time in abundance, but they're possible and they're right at our fingertips, literally.
Even typing, I find, you can it's just becoming conscious of it, right? And then sort of paying that extra attention to the sensation and actually being aware of what's happening as opposed to just running.
Yeah, and we are on autopilot. Let's face it. Our systems and humans have evolved from thousands of years to really just go through our day in autopilot, meaning we don't really give a lot of thought to our breath or what we notice as colors. We might, if we're really feeling that sensations, but that's just how we're wired. So it takes real effort to change it. And that's the discipline, and that's this noticing, and that's where we have to train ourselves. And it's all doable. That's the really cool part. It's super skill building possibilities. And this is emotional intelligence. You are building your self-awareness every time you do it. You're like going to the EI gym and lifting your muscles, building your muscles. But if you don't practice it, it won't get any better. And there will be no more shifts because you're kind of in that autopilot zone. So it takes lifting your head up, kind of seeing through the trees, literally, and trying something different. And that's the hard part because it's not that easy, and it's usually really new for most of us. And it does get easier over time, just like anything.
It does take some discipline or intent, as you would say.
Mm-hmm. And I actually, I have a podcast as well, and I hosted Dr. Amishi Jha, who's a neuroscientist, a couple episodes ago, and she does so much research from the University of Miami. But what she was talking about, she does studies on military personnel and all kinds of really cool neuroscience stuff. And what she was saying was when we're on autopilot, like we just don't know. We just don't have any sense of what we're doing. And it just over time takes that effort. And it's almost like when we were first learning that exercise was useful for us in the early 1900s, where people thought going to the gym was like a little scary and the women would never do that. And so there was this hesitancy, and like maybe some people tried it, but you don't really go all the time. And like, look at us now, 100 years later, it's a regimen. We know it improves our health. And she's basically making the analogy that is super similar in the world of mindfulness. We're just starting. We're like in the early 1900s, just like it was for physical exercise. And they're only starting to get the proof and the documentation and the studies that are coming out about how it's helpful. But I thought that was a really great analogy because it made me think about it in a way where I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. And no wonder no one knows what they're doing. And no wonder we don't really think and trust what we're doing with it and why we think it's hard. Like, it's just new. really is I mean, for us in the Western world, I know it's not new for cultures that have done it for thousands of years, but the science is new overall.
It's a social norm thing as well. I wrote about this recently, but like I kind of just when I finished high school, sort of got into a bit of meditation and was interested in Buddhism and, dabbled around with it. But, back then I would have felt embarrassed telling anybody, like I was sort of sitting in a room with a locked door practicing because it was, just kind of a weird thing to do. But it is becoming more and more, I think from the Western world's perception anyway, as the sort of the science becomes more illuminated and people can see the benefits, and people like yourself are out there actually saying, these practices and are actually going to make an impact on your life, that it's actually becoming more normal.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of finding what works for you. So it doesn't mean you have to have a sitting practice for whatever amount of time. Like the idea is to try stuff and see what works. So you might be having a daily pause where you notice your 3 mindful bites during every meal. It might be brushing your teeth and noticing the fuzzy bubbles or the hand pause. But the idea is that you're just increasing your awareness. And what happens is we don't increase our awareness to increase our awareness or to meditate to be better meditators, as Sharon Salzberg says. We are doing it so that we can feel better, like we feel more resilient. We increase our capacity to take on more or to like change things that might be adverse challenges in our mindset, and all of that is the point of all of this. It's not just to like create the skill so that we can breathe better, that's nice, it's a great benefit, but that's the name of the game.
It's not about winning. Have you come across the Mindful Strategist, Justine Bloom's book before?
I don't know it offhand. No,
it's new. So she, I think her background's in marketing. She's from Sydney originally. I think she works for VaynerMedia now, but she's put out this book called The Mindful Strategist. So it's essentially, it's kind of geared towards, I suppose, people in the creative industries. It's like a daily journal where it gives you sort of one thing a day. So it might be, go outside and notice something and journal it down. Or one thing I found particularly interesting in it was, pick once a day a piece of media that you're consuming, so YouTube video, podcast, book, and just write a little. So it's just getting you to stop and pause and actually, write down some details of things, which you often don't do. Yeah, it's really good. I'll send you a link to it. It's a great concept. She'd probably be interesting to chat to on your podcast.
Yeah, and thank you. I would love that. I really want to check out her work. And something I was just reminded of recently is, like, writing and journaling are great pauses too. And I got an idea yesterday from a friend of mine who literally just did a little drawing with what he thought his dream life would be like. And it was like stick figures and the house he wanted that could jump the fence and go for a run. But it made me think about it, and now I want to do that. But what a great way to pause. Why would I not want to live a dream that I could create for myself? And maybe I can't get all of it, but if I don't write it down or pause to even think about it, how will I know?
It's just a nice thing to sort of have manifested there on paper, right? That you can look back on.
I was like, I want to do that. That sounds so cool. And yeah, and then sure enough, he's living it. Apparently, that's what he told me. So I was excited for him.
Nice. I'm going to draw a really nice boat. Tell me a bit about the Pause Challenge that you're running on Facebook.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of getting community involved with learning skills for productivity. And to me, pausing is a conduit to that. So it's not just about refreshing and renewal. That's great. But what if you could pause to be more productive? And that is the key to this 3-day Facebook challenge. So you can join us. Anyone can join. It's free, but it will be on my Facebook group. And the link is basically bit.ly/pause challenge. And you can go just register. We start April 10th through the 12th, 2019. So we are a couple weeks out, actually a little less than 2. And the idea is we're going to have 3 days. Each day is going to be a theme, but we're going to learn some key emotional intelligence skills that you can just start to implement immediately, about where you can start naming primary emotions. And like, we can talk more about that, of course, for like much more time, but we don't have that. But I hope we get some folks joining. I would love to have everyone there. And again, it's free, and I hope it's going to be an hour a day on the Facebook Live. And so you'll be able to answer questions and talk to me, and hopefully just have a good time and learn some stuff.
Awesome. We'll send that link out. I'm going to join up. So it'll be interesting to see.
Thank you. I'm excited.
And you also have shared another link with us, Blueprint. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I have a free gift for listeners, and it's the 3 keys to turn overwhelm into thriving blueprint. And really, it's a PDF. Again, it's another free gift. If you go to my website, rachaelomeara.com/blueprint, one word, you can download it. And it talks about burnout. It's got the ways to name primary emotions and notice what you're yearning for. And like it's just a helpful guide. It's about 20 pages with pictures, so it's not a heavy read by any means, but you'll get a taste of some of the work that I do, and there's research in that as well, where I've been trying to really plug a lot of like science-based research on all this, so it just makes it more interesting to try.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. We'll check that out as well, and make sure to chuck it in the show notes.
Great.
So the question I asked everybody that I spoke to at Pause as a finish, what excites you about the future?
Yeah. Oh, what a good question. For me, more collaboration and co-creation, and it's not just like big silos of companies. And that to me feels like a huge theme of what PauseFest was. But the future is, I just want to say us. The future is us. The future is me and you and all of us who are taking personal responsibility for how we show up in the world and doing things with it that really satisfy you and like really make your life worth living for. And we're all capable of it. It's just a matter of making those little mini steps that create the longer, bigger picture. So collaboration and personal responsibility, and just hoping that we all can get there and create the world that we want to live in. And works for all of us.
It's exciting. I think, overwhelmingly people that I spoke to at Pause were, so excited, and a lot of similar themes, right? Like this is ours to grab and run and do what we want with. So let's do some cool stuff.
Yeah. And why not? Right. Mm-hmm. We don't, this is what I think the younger generations are teaching me is like, who says I got to work at a big company and like churn out my 40 hours? Like, no, it doesn't need to be that way. So I'm thrilled that it's changing, and I feel it. Like, I think it is changing.
Or maybe some of the listeners can draw their perfect life plan out for us and send it through on Instagram.
Yeah, we can put a little game together. Draw your life plan and post it on the show notes.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Sam. It was great to be on.